Welcome to the Life Engineering Podcast. My name is Gabriela Embon, former chemical engineer, relationship coach, and author. In each episode, we'll uncover the wisdom, strategies, and tools to help you build thriving relationships and purpose-driven careers. My wish is that something shared in this space touches your heart, brings clarity, or gently guides you toward what you need most in your life right now. Thank you for being here. Let's begin now. Welcome back to the Life Engineering Podcast, where we explore what it truly means to create a life of no regrets in our work and our relationships. I'm your host, Gabriela Embon, coach and author of Becoming a Power Couple, 4 Pillars to Engineer Legendary Marriages. On the Life Engineering Podcast, we explore one central question. How do we intentionally design lives, careers, relationships that don't quietly break down over time? Let me start by asking you a few questions. Have you ever watched something meaningful slowly lose its spark? Not because of one big failure, but through small compromises, distractions, and fixes that never address the real issue? Have you ever thought, on paper, this should be working, so why does it feel off? You see, this happens in careers, it happens in leadership, and yes, it also happens in marriages. Most breakdowns don't come from lack of effort. They come from losing clarity of vision, and replacing it with endless iterations. Today's conversation is about systems because whether we're talking about products, organizations, or relationships, the same invisible patterns show up again and again. My guest today has a name for this in the product world. She calls it product diseases, the silent patterns that cause good products built by smart people to lose their way. Radhika Dutt is the author of Radical Product Thinking. She's also an entrepreneur who has founded and exited multiple companies. She has advised organizations from startups to governments and currently serves as an advisor on the product thinking to the Monetary Authority of Singapore. Today, together, we'll explore how vision gets lost, how iterations replaces intention, and what it takes, whether in business or in life, to stay aligned with what truly matters. Radhika, I'm so excited to have you here. Welcome to the Life Engineering Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Gabriela. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, we had a wonderful pre-call, and I know this conversation is going to be so meaningful. But before we dive into frameworks and thinking, I'd like to start with you because you are an electrical engineer by training. We already have something in common. A product leader, an entrepreneur, and now an advisor shaping systems at the national level. How does an elect
So it's just so interesting for me how you talk about engineering your life, right? This concept of engineering your life resonates so deeply for me because for me engineering isn't just something I studied. It's really a way of thinking. It's shaped kind of how I think about the world, how I think about products even, right? So first of all, talking about products, my realization was the way we think about product is really outdated because the way we think about product is it's either a software or a thing, right? That you people use or that you sell. It's a hardware or software thing. This is how we traditionally have thought about product. But the reason it's outdated is because the way we can think about product is that your product is your mechanism to create change in the world. And so when you think about product in this way, anything can be your product if it's your mechanism to create change. In that case, right, if you're freelancing, if you are a therapist, like if you are, um, uh, even if you're parenting, each of those are products. Through parenting, you're creating a certain change in the world through your kids. If you're in government and you create a policy, that policy is your product to create a certain change in the market that you intend, right? We start to think about product in this way, and product thinking becomes applicable, whether it's in relationships or in business. And once you think about product in this way, it's here's the next step, which is that you can engineer this change very systematically. And this is where, the engineering training comes into play, where, when you want to build something, you don't just sort of throw a bunch of wires and circuits out there and say, oh, let's just throw these ingredients and see what pops up, right? Like you kind of have a clear vision for what is the problem you're solving. And then every step that you take from there on is to translate that vision into action and into your activities. And so taking that systematic approach is what I mean by engineering the change we want to bring about. And so that is, to me, the essence of product thinking. And what I found is this is how we can create the change that we intend, as opposed to just keep iterating and go like it's not working, but what next, and you keep trying, but like instead refocusing our efforts towards having this clarity of vision and then systematically translating it into activities.
I love that. And when you say systematically translating it, or you say this is not working, I there's a term that I am in love with that I use a lot, whether with my clients or in my talks, and it's the concept of course correcting.
Mhm.
We as engineers are so familiar with measuring and course correcting with that feedback loop, right? I mean, the entire body works on feedback. We're always measuring, and the body's course correcting. But so it's the way our bodies even work, biologically speaking, but we forget to do that in our lives, or we have a lot of aversion about course correcting because then we perceive that as failure. It didn't work. We were wrong.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing, which is we do sometimes we make course correct, but what we're measuring may be the wrong thing.
Mm.
So society very often might push us to measure things by a certain set of metrics that may not be the right metrics for you, right? The society has certain norms for what is right. That success is maybe a certain income, sending your kids to a certain kind of school, or whatever your peer group sets as a standard for you.
Where you should be at a certain age.
Exactly, right? So all of these might be metrics that you're measuring yourself by, and you're course correcting based on those metrics, but those might not be the right ones for you. And going back to what you were saying, in terms of engineering change and all of that being driven by a vision, having this clarity of vision, and the course correction should be based on, is this aligned with my vision or not, or is this progress towards my vision? And when you think about it in that way, those metrics then are derived from the vision as opposed to externally what you're told.
Absolutely. Absolutely love what you're talking about. And I want to take this a step further and understand, because I know you use the term product diseases. And we can see that in products as well as in relationships. And you describe product diseases as patterns where good products go bad. So for you, first of all, can you take us more into your journey? When you look back, what was the early signal that something was off, that even when things look successful, they were not for you?
Hmm. Um, yeah, so I can talk about a few examples of product diseases. So let's, first of all, this disease, where we're driven by metrics without really thinking about, are those the right metrics or not? It's just as relevant in the business world as it is on the personal side, right? And that's the disease I call hypermetricemia. where it's all about moving metrics up and to the right, where charts are all looking great, but it might not be the right set of metrics, right? Where we're obsessed with metrics, but maybe without thinking about, are those the right metrics? So how does that manifest in terms of products? In products, it might be that you're optimizing for user engagement. Social media does this, right? They optimize for eyeballs, getting you to do infinite scrolling, etc. And it's all about maximizing the time that you spend on the site. But it doesn't necessarily make end users happier people. And we know this with Instagram and Facebook. It doesn't matter which social media, but like we know that it is linked to depression and anxiety, etc. But that's just one example on the product side, but it's so common. Like every single product that where we're optimizing for metrics has a risk for hypermetricemia. On the personal side, it's something very similar, right? I think on in terms of hypermetricemia for myself, um, just to give you some background, I grew up in India till I was 12. Then I lived in South Africa. So I moved to South Africa in 1991, which was right after the apartheid laws were abolished, and until 1995, which was right after the first democratic elections were held. So monumental times in South Africa, right? And I was the second non-white in the whole school, the first in my class. So you can just imagine how much racism there was. So one of the things that it created in me is this need to have to constantly prove myself, where, I was a really smart kid, but nobody thought that of me because of the color of my skin. And, even the principal said, well, we're going to set you back by 1 year unless you can prove yourself that, in this last quarter of this year. So I joined in the last quarter of that year, that you can catch up to all of this and have good grades. I managed to prove that. But my point is, this whole thing of constantly having to prove myself, right? It created this drive in me that was at times toxic, where I always had to con- where hitting every single goal in terms of career milestones, various titles, etc., that was something that I felt like I needed to constantly prove myself with. And that's a form of hypermetricemia. And our listeners might have, a different version. You'd have to think about sort of where does that come from for you. But that's an example of one product disease. But of course, there are a
I
ton
can
of other
relate to that.
diseases
I think
in.
that's part of the reason I became an engineer, and I realized I was having a product disease. This is great product, successful, like you said, in terms of metrics, but it doesn't align with my vision
Yeah.
and my meaning, my purpose. And that's when I did a career change. So I can see how this also relates to personal fulfillment, personal lives. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry, I had to comment that because I
No,
see.
no, I love it. Exactly. I think this is the key, that, everything that you talk about in terms of engineering life, relationships, business. I love that it's this sort of umbrella idea of engineering things, right? Because once you start thinking in that way, it really is very applicable universally.
Mm,
But I was going to mention a different disease
please
that
do.
I've caught as well, which is hero syndrome.
Mm,
So I'll talk about, first of all, the business side of hero syndrome, right? So hero syndrome is where um, your your vision is so big. So this was right after graduating from MIT. Our first startup, well, right out of our dorm rooms. Our vision was revolutionizing wireless. And this was back in 2000, right? So if you ask me, well, what does revolutionizing wireless mean? 25 years later, I still couldn't tell you, but we knew we wanted to be big. And the way we measured success was, how much money we had raised in terms of fundraising, all the big named logo clients, et cetera, that we had on our website. Um, but this was the hero syndrome. And what that ends up meaning is, when your vision is so broad and fuzzy, like revolutionizing wireless, sort of anything goes. And so we were building things, and what we built was an early version of Siri back in 2000. And if you think about how way ahead of time we were, in terms of technology and our thinking and being visionary, yeah, that was fantastic. But we were entirely too early to market, right? And this is kind of what happens when hero syndrome sets in, that you're not thinking about what's the problem at hand and what should I be solving for. And I think in our personal lives, there's a different kind of hero syndrome as well. And I would love to hear your take on this and what resonates for you. And I'll share my version too.
Please do. I want to hear it. Yes.
I go first. Okay. So I think a version of hero syndrome is, sometimes in our upbringing, right? We're always taught to achieve. And this vision is, being the best at whatever. Um, and I love that, my parents, they had the same expectations of me as my brother. There was never any of this gender discrimination. Like, love that my parents had always these big dreams for me. But on the other side, the flip side of the same thing, right, of the same positive, is also that you always feel like you need to be this hero. And um, another example of this is, just because as a kid I had so much emotional maturity and being able to be um, a friend to my mom, for example, what I find myself as an adult is often trying to be the hero for friends, for example, where I'm often the one taking the emotional support role, whereas you kind of have to step back from this hero syndrome and say, okay, I have to have a clearer vision. What is it that, aligns with my vision? There are things where I'm able to offer support, things where I sort of need to step back. If I think about, and we'll talk about this in a moment, um, how do you trade off between vision versus what is sustainable and survivable for you? And sometimes you have to think about, there's only so much vision debt you can take on versus only so much investing in the vision that you can do. Like, either can really tire you out. But we can talk about that in a moment, and those terms that I talked about. But basically, hero syndrome is where when you don't have that clarity of vision, you're trying to do everything for everyone as well.
Wow. This is really, really powerful. And my brain automatically um, connected or made the association with why are you doing the way what you're doing, or start with your why. Start with your vision, but also start with your why. Why are you going after this goal? Why do you want that? Why are you always um, overgiving, right? And the way that I think about this is there are two different reasons. One is it comes as a way of compensating. It comes from need, it comes from lack, it comes to solve a problem. So am I choosing this product, or am I choosing this pattern to solve a problem that I have? Like, I feel like I cannot disappoint my parents, or I need to be the bigger person, or I need to be overgiving to be loved, whatever problem you're solving. Or am I choosing this because it is completely in alignment with me right now? It's who I am, and I feel this is where I need to be right now in this moment. This is what I'm called to do. And I think that when we make choices from a place of solving a problem, or I call this from a place of correction, we normally create another problem, because that's reactive behavior. So I'm trying to solve a problem, but I will always create, there's going to be a side effect. So if I'm overgiving, maybe I'm solving the problem of feeling that I'm enough, but I'm creating exhaustion or burnout or hustle. So it's not perhaps so much what I do, it's the reason behind it that we want to ask ourselves. That's the way I perceive what you were sharing, right?
See, I think, so I agree with you to some extent, but here's the thing. You might be doing it for all the right reasons. It might be completely aligned with your vision. But at some point, you also have to think about what is sustainable for you. Like, so to go back to what I was talking about, what you're doing basically at every moment, at every decision point, is you're balancing is this good for my vision or not, versus is this helpful in terms of survival or not, right? Or in terms of what is sustainable for me. And so I like to visualize this trade off on an X and a Y axis. And then you'll see what I mean in terms of this
It's
balance,
your
right?
engineering brain. Okay.
Exactly. But visualizing it, right, makes it so much easier for us to make these trade offs very deliberately as opposed to just intuitively. So, your y axis is your vision, and we'll talk about how to write a clear vision in a moment. But is your y axis helps you assess, is this good for my vision or not good for my vision? And the x axis is this good for survival or not? Meaning, is this sustainable for me or not? Right. And in business, survival might be financial survival. In your personal life, it might be, about what is sustainable, meaning like in terms of just bandwidth, and what is sustainable, it might be financial. You have to think about what is that x axis in terms of sustainability for you, right?
I like that.
And then once you have these two axes clear in your head, now you're able to think about your decisions and how they fit on four quadrants. So here are the four quadrants. First quadrant is easy decisions. This is good for the vision and it's sustainable for you. Great. Those easy decisions, like you're probably not even going to be thinking about those. Great. Go forth and make it happen. But know that if you're always only focusing on easy decisions, sometimes you're not thinking about the longer term. So sometimes you have to be doing something that I call investing in the vision. Investing in the vision is where it's good for the long term vision, but it's not helpful in terms of short term sustainability. So an example of this might be, you talked about retraining in your career, right? So in terms of vision, it was a good vision fit, but you were investing in the vision because it wasn't sustainable in the short term. And maybe, that was because, financially that meant that you were having to give up your stable income to then invest in retraining. It might have been even the level of burnout because now you're studying while managing a ton of other things. So that's an example of investing in the vision. The opposite of that quadrant, right, is vision debt. This is what is sustainable for you or survivable. Like it's great for the short term, but in the long term vision angle, like it's not good for the long term vision. Right? And so I call that vision debt. So an example of this might be maybe you're working at a job where you really hate this job, right? But it's paying the bills, but it's not great for your long term vision. So you might see that as vision debt. A different example on the business side might be that, for for your product, let's say, your salesperson says to you, if you just add this one feature that is custom for a client, we can win this mega deal. And you say, fine, let's do it. Or like in terms of strategy, your CEO wants you to vibe code everything. And you see that this is not good for the product. It's not good for the long-term vision. But hey, it's sustainable in terms of, well, it's going to make you look good in front of the CEO. That might be vision debt. So these are examples of like whether personal life or business, like thinking about these quadrants, right? And the last quadrant is the danger zone, which is it's not good for the long-term vision. It's not good for short-term, it's not good for survival either or sustainable. And that's the danger zone. It's not like you do things in the danger zone on purpose. It's more like if you haven't thought about it, you sort of end up in this quadrant.
Oh,
Or
I can definitely make a list of all the tasks that I do on a daily basis. And I'm going to do this. And I'm going to create these quadrants and I'm going to place them where they belong.
And so to go back to what you were saying, right? You might be doing things that are aligned with your vision. It's perfectly clear in terms of the why and why you're doing it. And yet, you might be investing in the vision so much that you're feeling exhausted because you're doing things that are constantly not sustainable for you. So that's a fast track to burnout if you find that in terms of all of your activities, you're doing a ton of investing in the vision. And the opposite of that might be that, you're taking on so much vision debt that is burning you out, right? Like there are so many things that can, that too much vision debt or too much investing in the vision, et cetera, could burn you out, right? caregiving, that's another example. Maybe caregiving is exactly part of your vision. You know, you care about your kids, your family, you're in caregiving mode, maybe for the elders in your household. But maybe you're burning yourself out and you haven't even thought about how much downtime you desperately need. You've been investing in the vision. It aligns perfectly with your why, but in the end, sometimes even just taking stock of all of this makes you realize, how am I spending my time and just why am I feeling burnt out?
Yeah, this is amazing. So, okay, so I get this now. Now it's so much more clear, and I can see how practical this can become if you actually take the time to look at what you're doing on a daily basis. But it all starts by having a vision. And you mentioned you're going to share with us how to create that vision, right? Because if I don't have the vision, I cannot do this. So the first step is to have the vision. What's your advice on how to create a great vision?
Yeah, and I love what you said, because you're exactly right. You remember I told you our vision was revolutionizing wireless. When you have a vision like that, you're pretty much like, yeah, let's build everything. Like everything is going to help, right? But so yeah, how do you write a good vision? So first of all, a good vision has to be detailed, and it has to be detailed about the problem that you're seeing, and then describing, why must this problem be solved? Like, why is the status quo absolutely unacceptable? And then finally, what's the end state you envision and how you're going to bring this about? So I'm going to share this vision from two angles. And, the way I talk about this in the book, Radical Product Thinking, is I have a fill in the blank statement so that you don't have to fuss about the words. Don't worry about wordsmithing this vision. It's not about the words. It's about answering these profound questions for yourself. And that's the hard part. So if you can focus on the questions, not on the words, that's the key. And so the fill in the blank statement helps you do that. So I'm going to answer this vision, fill in the blank statement, one for a product at work, for a startup that I had. And second, I'll share with you my personal vision statement. And you'll see kind of how it evolves as well. So, okay, first for a company. So this is a startup that I had. So here's how the vision statement would go. Today, when amateur wine drinkers want to find wines that they're likely to like and learn about wine, they have to find attractive looking wine labels or find wines that are on sale. This is unacceptable because this leads to so many disappointments, and it's hard to learn about wine in this way by trying random bottles. We envision a world where finding wines you like is as easy as finding movies you like on Netflix. We're bringing about this world through a recommendations algorithm that matches wines to your taste and an operational setup that delivers these wines to your door. And so the power of this vision was, I hadn't told you anything about this startup, but, unlike the vision of revolutionizing wireless, hopefully you knew exactly what we were doing and why we were
Exactly.
doing it.
So clear.
Thank you. And so that is the power of a radical vision statement. And while I read this to you and shared all of this, right, it took me a lot of time to write this because there are profound questions to answer. So the end result looks simple, but don't feel, for our listeners, don't feel like, this should come easily to you. So should I share a personal vision statement,
Please.
or I'd love any thoughts you have in the meanwhile?
Yes, yes, please do.
Okay, so here's a personal vision statement I wrote when my kids were a little younger. So here's how it went. So today, when my kids and my husband want to process emotions um, uh, and deal with their day, feel better and deal with things that they are struggling with, thinking about, reflecting on, etc., they have to either rely completely on themselves or look to me. But then if I don't have the bandwidth, I'm not able to give them what they need. This is unacceptable because, um, for my kids to be able to grow up and have secure attachment styles and not need years and years of therapy, like this is just, this current state is not what I want for them. I envision a world where I'm able to have Gandhi like patience at home and be able to be completely present and be that emotional anchor in my household. I am bringing about this world through only taking on roles that give me this mental and emotional bandwidth so that I can also play this role in my family.
Mm.
So I wrote this vision statement, by the way, after I quit a really toxic job that I was doing. And like I could really see how it was affecting my kids. Not because, not because I wasn't being careful. Like I had tried my very best to not bring home all of my stresses. But I was noticing the effects, and like I had to take some time to write a vision and think about what is it that I want to do. So that's an example of how you can use the same vision statement, whether for work or in your personal life.
I love this. I love the clarity that it provides for you, and then it almost acts as a filter, right?
Exactly.
That you can use to make decisions. Is my decision aligned with my vision?
Exactly. I love that you said that, Gabriela, because what happens when you have a vision like revolutionizing wireless is it's no longer acting like a filter. Whereas this is exactly how I describe it in the book, even. You took the words out of my mouth. That a good detailed vision acts like a filter for your decisions so that you can make the right choices.
Hmm. Very powerful. I have
But
so many more questions to ask you, but probably I'm gonna start, getting towards the end. I want to talk about courage because vision requires courage. So I can see that sometimes we might have resistance. What resistance do you see when leaders are asked to slow down and define what they truly want to build? We are so
mm,
caught up in the doing. And you say, wait a second, let's revisit the vision. Let's slow down. Let's ask the deeper questions. Um, I could see people say, we don't have time for this.
I have actually heard those exact words. Someone once said to me, "We don't have time for strategy." But the way I like to help people visualize this is imagine your whole team is a bunch of arrows, right? And we're all trying to move fast. And if we all move in different directions, imagine all of these arrows pointing in different directions. You have chaos when everyone is moving fast, but in different directions. And instead, right, when you have all of these arrows pointing in the same direction, that's when you have velocity instead of just speed. Because, going back to engineering, as we know, speed is not enough. You need speed plus direction, and that gives us forward velocity. And when I think about this in relationships as well, right, there's this alignment aspect that is really important, that we sort of have to step back and create this alignment, whether it's in a business relationship or even in a personal one. You know, this, even what I talked about, this vision versus survival, when I use it in a business setting, it aligns us in terms of, if you and I disagree on whether this is an important initiative or not, very often it might be because we might not be aligned on the vision, or maybe we're not aligned on what survival means for us. So, having this vision versus survival sort of takes it out of the realm of, I think this, well, it's my opinion versus yours. We're now talking about something a lot less subjective. We're now talking about, does this align with our vision? It begs this question of, what is the vision? What does survival mean? And so now these are more objective discussions. And the same thing applies in relationships as well.
Absolutely. I can so see how this is essential in marriage. That will be under the third pillar of the power couple method, the our pillar. It's our life, our vision. We are two co-founders, but we don't always have the same vision. And sometimes couples live their lives, lead two separate lives. So when you were talking about the vectors, I see that a lot in couples, even though it's only two vectors, but I see that each one is pointing in a complete different direction.
Mm.
So totally see the parallel when it comes to relationships. And I always say that your relationship is your leadership. Um, you know, it's where leadership starts.
Mm. I love what you said. And maybe just to
Your leadership incubator. I was looking for that word. Yeah.
say that again, please.
That your relationship is your leadership incubator. This is where
Mm.
you practice leadership first.
I love that. I guess one engineering analogy that I've been thinking about recently about relationships is that every relationship is a metastable state. And I say it's metastable because you're either growing together or you're growing apart. There is no status quo, right? Because neither of you is staying status quo. Every event in your life is creating learnings and growth. So you cannot help but grow. And even if you choose not to grow, that is stagnation, which by definition is decline. So every relationship, whether it is with your work or it is in your personal life, every relationship is metastable. And so it either means you're growing together or you're growing apart. And that is where this alignment comes into place.
Absolutely. Wow. Very powerful. So much fun. I could continue talking to you for an hour. But my last question, for someone listening who feels something in their life or relationship is off, but they can't quite name it. Okay. What's the first question they should ask themselves?
Hmm. One thing that we could go back to is sometimes these product diseases. At least at work, I've found that it's a good way of um, of talking about things without blame, to be able to look at product diseases and think about, what resonates for me out of these product diseases. And so, this whole terminology of diseases is helpful because it's no one's fault to catch a disease. Like, it's blame free. This happens, it's ubiquitous. And so let's talk about it openly in that way, right? And so, in terms of your personal life, too, I think the same term of product diseases is helpful. You can look at, the kinds of product diseases that I talk about in the book, and then think about, what resonates for you out of those diseases, and taking the blame out of the picture altogether, because, it's so common to catch these diseases. And then you can start to say, okay, what do I fix? What steps do I take to start to engineer the life that I want? And then you can start with, vision, prioritizing in this vision versus survival, etc., and think about a targeted approach as opposed to this. Otherwise, it's hard to know kind of where do I start.
Mm. And emotions take over too. So that's what I love about life engineering, that it's mind over emotions,
Mm.
right? And you don't have to feel to do it. You just need to commit and do it.
Mm.
Thank you so much, Radhika. Can you tell us where people can find your book?
So, Radical Product Thinking is the book name, and it's on Amazon and in bookstores around you. You can also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I can share with you my LinkedIn profile so that people are welcome to reach out. I just always love to hear from people and how they're creating change in their lives. And then, lastly, I am working on my next book. And it's about why goals and targets don't work, and how we can shift to a mindset of puzzle setting and puzzle solving instead of goal setting.
Ooh,
And so I would love to chat more about that another time.
yeah, we can definitely have another episode about that. And your book is not just for companies and leaders, it's also applicable for personal life, correct?
It is. And this is what I love about it, that, so many people have reached out saying that they've used this at work, but equally in their personal lives. And in the book, I very specifically share personal life examples in the conclusion chapter.
Wonderful. Fantastic. Radhika, thank you so much for this conversation. Your work is wonderful. And what stands out to me is that failure rarely comes from lack of effort. It comes from losing sight of why we're building in the first place. What's the vision? Whether we are engineering products, careers, or marriages, the work is the same. Returning to vision, choosing alignment over speed or velocity over speed, and having the courage to ask the questions that prevent quiet decay. So thank you for sharing all your wisdom and your experience with our listeners. And for our listeners, I leave you with this reflection. Where in your life are you fixing symptoms instead of revisiting the vision? Okay. Once again, Radhika, thank you for bringing such a depth and clarity to the Life Engineering podcast. Thank you, dear listeners, for tuning in. Please remember to subscribe to our podcast. And if you enjoy what you heard, please share it with someone you love. I'll see you in 2 weeks. Until next time.